Today, we're going to talk about how companies can successfully hire, retain, and engage employees to create meaningful work experiences for their invaluable talent. Welcome to our plenary session on future CX talent strategies. Our first panelist is a huge proponent for remote work and believes flexibility is tomorrow's currency. I am delighted to bring you Lucas Torcomanes. Our next panelist is the founder and chief psychologist at 9 Yards Innovation, which helps companies drive strategic value and make better decisions. Let us all welcome the founder and managing director of 9 Yards Innovations, Shiva Demister. Hi, Shiva.
Hi, Alex. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to have you. Welcome, welcome. Our third panelist is an enthusiastic explorer of relationship management, innovation, and customer service ideas and practices. I am glad to have with us the innovation lead and customer experience director at Microsoft, Daniel Mendez-Costabel. And to finally complete our panel of speakers, we have a CX expert who has spent more than 15 years in ICT research and consulting. Thrilled to be joined by the director and head of the Asia Pacific Customer Experience Practice at Frost & Sullivan. Welcome back, Krishna Baija. It's great to have you back, Krishna, and three of you also great meeting you for the first time. I'm very excited to talk to you, what you guys have to say and share with me. So we're gonna get right into it right now. The events in the last couple of years have been dubbed as the biggest experiment in history of work. Now, while we can attribute shifts in talent strategies to accelerated technological progress, what can you share about recent behaviors, expectations, and trends? Krishna, I want to go to you first.
Great, Alex. These are great questions, and let's look back. So the learning curve from the pandemic has been steep for most companies. The pandemic tested our resiliency, and resiliency required flexibility. Businesses had to design a new way of doing business, whether it's in-person or customer-facing models. Contact centers had to adopt work-at-home agents at a scale to ensure business continuity. So post-pandemic, over 40% of organizations confirmed increasing the number of remote agents, making hybrid work model likely a permanent feature. Now, organizations must balance a digitally primed hybrid operating model and enhance employee experience capabilities through intelligent automations. Employee experience is the important conduit between a brand, its vision, and customers. In its simplest form, it all starts with leadership excellence, which creates the right employee experience to generate the right customer experience and yield desired business results. However, only 1 in 3 business voted employee experience, employee engagement among the top 3 indicators of their strategic performance, compared to almost 1 in 2 choosing customer experience. But the pandemic put a spotlight on the need to improve employee experience across all business sectors. The bolstering of workforce engagement management solutions, which was already a heavy area of investment before the pandemic, has become even more important. Now, unpredictability of work experienced during the pandemic dovetailed with the great resignation as millions of workers choose to leave their positions for retirement, a sabbatical, or simply a better opportunity. The contact center rapidly shifted to work-at-home agent models, but also was placed on notice to make the workplace better. During this time, we also saw the geographical boundary being diminished when it came to hiring. So the gig economy trend of recent years will continue to intensify in the short term, and contact centers are looking for better ways to hire, onboard, and retain workers. Already in play are AI-powered recruiting and hiring tools that find the best agents for a particular role. Training programs and performance management also infuse AI, analytics, and gamifications. And this will uncover in-the-moment learning opportunities and targeted training for groups or individual agents. However, that will not be enough. To retain talent, flexible scheduling and adaptable payments will be essential considerations in the near term, along with holistic employee wellness program. Now, the combination of artificial intelligence tools alongside the human touch is enabling augmented agents, enhanced capabilities, and performance level. Agents can now focus on providing a customer experience that is more helpful, efficient, and personalized. The key in this case is in automating tasks and interactions wherever possible, and then reserving live agents for when intuition, emotional intelligence, and the human touch are most needed. Virtual assistants can provide guidance and process automations in the background or working alongside an agent, helping to fulfill in forms, investigating knowledge database for information, or even providing a guided resolutions. Now, the skill set required for advisors delivering CX is also evolving very quickly. Uh, the increasing importance of skilled labor is further highlighted by the transition of low complexity support to online or self-service mode, driven by the heavy automation and digitization. Now, despite growth in digital channels, phone conversations are currently remain the preferred options for customer service escalations. And as focus shifts from routine service to last mile support requiring human touch to deliver enhanced CX, agents will need to become the expert in even niche subjects and display more human qualities. CX interactions volumes are surging exponentially, and as contact centers continue to face staffing challenges, they need to find ways to balance how the service is delivered, whether automated, self-service, or agent-assisted. Even agent-assisted services must be thought from the best shore perspective. And contact center managers, they are likely to draw from a large pool of talent further away from physical offices, accessing diverse, qualified, and motivated individuals. So it is also time to re-emphasize that contact center employees, the frontline workers, must be valued as not only a key part of the organization and its branding, but be considered perhaps the most important part of the organizations due to their knowledge and constant with customers. Finally, the customer care team needs to be regarded as the real talent and be valued. I believe these are some of the key elements that will shape the workforce in the contact centers.
Compelling points on hiring and retaining labor were brought up by Krishna. Again, I'd like to highlight what he said about human touch and the balancing between customer and employee. The holistic, I think is what you said, Krishna, holistic employee well-being. Love that. Now, with the prevailing talent crunch along with the economic pinch felt by a number of tech companies, what is the current state of the talent market? And what are the ups? What are the downs? We'd like to know your thoughts, Lucas.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Alex. It's definitely been a roller coaster, and we only spoke about this about a month ago, and things have already changed since then. So just to go back, when COVID hit, everyone was forced to go into a work from home model in order to survive and in order for the business to continue. And then we saw companies trying to lift some of these work from home guidelines and try to bring people back in the office. We saw more COVID waves hit, so they had to go back to work from home. Now they're trying again to bring workers back to the office. And so far, it's failed because there's a really big backlash from employees that don't want to go back to the old way of working. Lately as well, we've seen increase in layoffs, especially in the tech industry due to the rise of interest rates. But overall, we see unemployment still being at very healthy levels. I would say this, at this particular moment in time, it's the first time there's actually a choice. There's a choice for employers and employees to decide what kind of strategy they want to follow. And it's very interesting to see how the situation will evolve because employees vote with their choice of which employer they want to go for. In general, we see three overarching themes in the talent market today. The first one is that the value proposition for remote work has not changed. The same benefits that employees were experiencing in the past is the same benefits that they enjoy today. And we generally see employees reprioritizing their relationships with work and their employers. And then on the flip side, we see a lot of value for employers who have lower overheads, and they also have access to a much larger talent pool and often at a very lower price point. So the overarching value prop for both employees and employers is still there. That's the first point. The second point is that the top roles that were very hard to fill in the past, they are still hard to fill today. That hasn't changed. That's a supply issue. That's not a different kind of environment that would change the root cause of that problem. Finding engineers, finding product managers, finding AI specialists, finding top-tier management is still as challenging today as it was a few months ago. And the third one is that top talent requires more flexibility from their work. It's today's currency in terms of the talent market, and we don't see that change. We don't see that trend changing. So right now, we are seeing companies that are trying to push return back to office mandates, and we're seeing some of them backfiring. We saw Apple losing their head of AI recently because of this decision of returning everyone back to the office. We saw Tesla recently that announced that everyone needs to work back from the office. We're seeing that they don't have enough desks. They don't have enough parking space for their employees. Even Wi-Fi connectivity has suffered because of all these people are in the office and they hadn't really planned for that event to happen. So, time will tell how this will end up in terms of the overarching trends. But the macro reason I shared above is the reason that we don't really see this trend changing in the long run. This trend of going more towards a remote work environment. And there's going to be businesses that will reject this and will want people to go back to the office. And it's completely up to them to have this right and mandate this from their employees. And there's going to be some companies that will have to do this due to their business model. They have to have people physically present. But my argument and the thesis here is that the companies that want to compete for top talent will have to offer this flexibility for their employees if they want to attract and retain the best people in the business.
I love what you said, Lucas. I just want to go back to, you mentioned choice, that ultimately it is the employer or the employee's choice. So are you saying that the better choice is, of course, the hybrid setup?
I'm actually not a fan of hybrid. It's kind of it's a halfway between two worlds. Each one of them has benefits and negatives. I think the face-to-face interaction, you get incredible engagement that you can't really replicate in a virtual environment. But you have the downside of commute time, you have the downside of traffic, of additional cost, time away from your family or from your other priorities in your life. On the flip side, with a remote work setup, you gain more time, you gain more flexibility, but you don't have the same kind of engagement that you have in a face-to-face environment. Going for a middle of the road solution, I just don't see that to be a viable long-term one, to be honest, because you're still going to have the downsides of working in a face-to-face environment. You still have commute. You still have the fact that you're locked in an area. You can't really, be as mobile, and you don't really experience the benefits of remote work. So, I'm sure there's going to be companies that go with this strategy of having a hybrid model. I just don't see them coming on top in terms of the fight for the best talent.
Well, I think it's great you gave us, both sides of the story and both sides of the coin. I think it all boils down to the employee and employer choice. So thank you so much, Lucas. Moving on now, organizations have been tackling this ultra-dynamic talent market situation while navigating an economic shift. Now, amid everything that is happening, the employee or the talent is at the center of it all. Now, my next questions, I'm going to direct towards Daniel and Krishna. Daniel, will go with you first, and here they are. How will you describe the new way of working, and what does this mean to employees? Daniel?
First of all, I love that question, Alex. I think it's so central to everything that we are living and that we have been living through the last several months and years. Many items have been already highlighted by Krishna in a very clear way. From my point of view, I will describe the new way of working as more flexible for sure. And I think that that's an attribute or a feature that we all are sharing and identifying one way or another. And also something that Lucas was mentioning, self-awareness, right? Organizationally speaking, but also individually speaking, we see and we hear a lot of stories about people reflecting, changing priorities, reanalyzing their careers, their needs, their functions, and everything in between, right? So I think that those are definitely big attributes of the new way of working. A couple of other ones that I want to mention, aiming to more empowerment while also building inclusive practices across environments, across cultures is another feature of the new ways for sure. And we see much more intentional focus on some of those areas from organizations and also from individuals for sure. The other thing that I want to highlight as part of the response is that there is tension between the old and the new ways, as you can expect in any kind of transformation and change. And I can see that tension between the old and the new in action across companies when they take decisions, for example, to move people back to the office without proper discussions, and from employees themselves when they experience proximity bias and everything in between, right? There are very different degrees and layers of that tension happening right now across organizations, across geographies, across cultures. We all need to continue doing a lot of work to fully transform the recent changes we have seen around into really true better models for all of us, right? I think that if there is something that I want to highlight is that this process has an end, and I don't think that it will end soon for any of us. I want to be really optimistic about the change, and I am aware that there is still so much more to do. And I hope that we continue having more of these conversations, these exchanges, to keep nurturing this change and this process together. We can take it for granted. That's a big part of my message to you today. It needs effort from all of us to make it something durable, truly inclusive. And I hope that each of us can contribute to the change, the challenges in front of us. That's a big part of what I see when I think about the new way of working today, Alex.
I love that, Daniel. I think it was Michael Jackson who said it all starts with the man in the mirror. You agree? You know the song? But before I go to Daniel, you mentioned that so the working atmosphere has become more flexible, as you said, for sure. But I think you and Krishna share the same answer. I think you were related upon the topic of diving into a more targeted skill or improving in your skill so as to better yourself in the workforce. Does that mean in a more flexible work environment, you have more chances to do that and more opportunity to do that as well?
To me, opportunity is the key word in that question. Certainly, there are more opportunities, and we have seen a lot of transformation coming from organizations in terms of traditional learning and development or training, or however you want to call it, creating and exposing more opportunities to people. And not only for each one of the organizations working with their employees, we have also seen across the whole ecosystem, not only, I'm not going to talk about just the efforts that Microsoft has been running, but some other companies like Google, Amazon, a lot of our companies have been created these kind of motions to provide free, easily accessible digital training for specific lines of work, for a specific set of skills, for specific roles in organizations that are available. Not in the past, it was more like, okay, we provide this because you're going to be, at some point hired by our organization, or we're going to be part of our talent pool or something like that. And now what I have seen during the last couple of years, again, coming from us, for example, what we call our digital learning experience, the last 2 years, aiming to provide training and show opportunities for more than 30 million people at a global scale. And obviously, it's not Microsoft hiring 30 million people, right? It's really the whole world and the whole set of organizations and ecosystem. So going back to your specific question, I think that those opportunities are very recent, and I haven't seen that same kind of motion in the past, and that creates a level of enablement, a set of opportunities for individuals to take advantage of, to nurture and develop a new set of skills that was not fully available, at least not at the same scale in the past. When you think about flexible digital environments, the ability for people to connect to that, and these offerings to help people grabbing more skills, developing themselves, and then connecting that experience to effective jobs across the whole ecosystem, I think that's truly a very good meaning of opportunities, not just in a theoretical manner, but in a very practical and impactful manner.
I have to agree. Thank you, Daniel. It's right. I think on the flip side, it's the fact that they're now more available and within arm's reach of everyone around the world. I'd like to go to Krishna now. Same questions that I asked to Daniel. What would you have to say?
Right. Again, I think Daniel covered it pretty well. And I think I also totally agree with some of the points what Lucas was talking about, right? And what COVID has taught us is, look, what we never thought possible has become possible, right? And I think that's a great learning we need to take away as well. And it has also given us that opportunity of being flexible, right? And we did a recent survey. In our recent survey, it kind of showed that, everyone is kind of dealing with the challenges still continue to be the top priority when it comes to the business, right? But then improving customer experience and satisfaction, at the same time, enhancing operational efficiencies, automation on business process, employee experience, these are other things which coming into the priority as well. So it's not only about just surviving through this, right? And still continue to move forward and with a great pace. Now, Lucas was mentioning about the hybrid work. And again, here hybrid means different things for different people, right? And in my opinion, hybrid should be a choice which really works best for the organizations and for the employee to get the best out of that, the situation, what the company and the organization's in, right? So in that perspective, one must adopt an agile and flexible workforce and ensure putting the right technology in place to enable and empower them in a very secure environment. Whether that secure environment is in the office or at remote, it's totally up to the organizations and the people working. Now, we are talking about skill, right? And I think Daniel was mentioning about how important the new skill you need to get on, and how this is an opportunity for us to move on, move up the value chain as well. So if we just take examples from the customer experience, when we are interacting with organizations, we're no longer just making calls to the contact center agents for the simple task, right? For very simple task, we are going to online, we are finding ourselves, we are doing self-serve. And then what is happening there? The more complex things I'm stuck, I'm calling the agents. So if you just think from the contact center perspective, the agents can't be just those taking calls and just answering basic things. They really need to be the experts. So we really need to think that way. How do we kind of enable them? And then organizations really need to augment their employers' capability with tools that support and enable them in a variety of ways to deliver that efficient and frictionless CX, right? And if you just think about the CX leaders, I think they are also taking note of that immediate need. The organizations really need to be agile to so that they are adopting. If I say the agile methodology, the organizations can also enhance the employees' well-being, which I was talking earlier, that holistic wellness, how important is this? So this would mean organizations bringing together people, process, connectivity, technology, time, and place to find the most appropriate and effective way of working to complete the particular task. And such approach is likely to be the winning formula for talent war as well.
I have to agree, Krishna, with the holistic employee well-being is, I think a big part of that is equipping all of your employees with everything that you can give them so that they can do their job to the utmost, efficiency. But yeah, moving on with what we just learned about the new way of working, do you envision new roles emerging, Daniel? And if so, what are these and how crucial are these new roles?
Another great question, and I'm going to go back to a couple of the things that Krishna was also mentioned, because to me, one of the most important new things that we are seeing and are being mapped into new roles at an organizational level are roles like what it's being called the Chief Digital Officer, for example, and also what we are calling Culture and Employee Experience Officer. And to me, the key word is employee experience, which Krishna was mentioning earlier too, right? Those are some examples that I have witnessed myself across different organizations on how some of those areas of impact and different consideration are being taken into the specific definition and prioritization of some roles. But changes are taking place not only in new roles, but in everyone's roles. And I think that's important to highlight. People are being more involved into employee experience conversations and work across many different organizations. What we were talking earlier about self-awareness and empowerment, empathy, those are keywords that are, again, part of a lot of conversations these days, a lot of definitions of how we work together, how we support our customers, how we interact in the different markets and cultures, and even going beyond just involvement and becoming part of conversations about how to better work together across teams, across organizations, across employees, including some of the recent conversations in some markets like United States and other places about unions, for example, right? And other ways to articulate and understand employee and organizations' needs. Some of those conversations were not happening in the same way with the same dynamic in the past. And I'm pretty encouraged to see how, some, again, are being better defined in some places. The volume of those conversations is definitely rising in some other organizations, and not just because now you have an employee experience officer role, but because the culture of the companies are also including that concept in a much stronger and well-defined manner. It's about roles. It's also about how some roles are becoming more relevant or influential, and how those roles reflect a different consideration for subjects such as culture and employee experience. It's not good enough to have just a mission statement that everybody can repeat. How you land that into effective, ongoing daily behaviors and how it becomes a conversation with your employees. I think that's a big switch that I am seeing in many organizations across, and it feels really encouraging for the whole relationship between employers and employees.
I think it's interesting what you said, Daniel, that it's not that just we have new roles, but the fact that even the old roles have somehow not really shifted, but I guess have become more important. And back to what Krishna was saying, with the help of AI and all the chatbots, it's very interesting how there's still a balance of the human touch and whatever other tools that we need to help, do our job. So thank you for that. Now we have covered. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to add one point that, whatever we do, I think the center of this needs to become the empathy. And I think increasingly what we are seeing that, organizations are having actually a lot more empathy about people and how they feel and what they want to do. And I think that's a great change. And I think even in the existing roles, people are thinking the way they are doing things in a bit different that way. So I totally agree with Daniel.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Now, moving on, we have covered and observed behaviors, new expectations, and emerging roles. Shiva, I'm finally glad to get to you with this question. Can you tell us about innovations or advancements necessary to shape the future workforce?
Sure, well, thank you. It's been interesting to listen in so far. And some of the points really tie into some of the things that I had in mind as well in terms to cover basically. So you mentioned necessary advancements. And so there's lots of things that we can cover, but basically two things that I'm very passionate about. I guess number one is culture. And again, very soft, but culture. We look at all the technology that is available, AI, automation, moving to Web3, metaverse is currently a big buzzword, right? And companies are adapting their business strategies to do things, faster, better, or cheaper for their customers or for themselves. But eventually these business strategies, they need to be executed by people. And it's a bit of an overused phrase, but I do think it covers the essence quite well, which is culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And so basically, if we look at culture change in general takes a couple of years. And yes, it can be, it can go a little bit faster if drastic things happen. A new CEO, COVID is one of those drastic things. Even moving office spaces can actually create very different dynamics in a culture. So you can speed it up. But fundamentally, it takes a couple of years to see changes onto the work floor in people's behaviors. And so businesses don't have a couple of years. They want things right now. And it's really important to be able to sit down and actually think, okay, what are things that we can have right now? And what can we solve by hiring the right people, by training people, by trying to change things? What are things where you have to be a little bit more patient, and how can we mitigate that? So basically, in addition to a business strategy, which these days is full with new technologies and lots of buzzwords, like a lot of companies that we deal with, you want to move into the metaverse, but I have no idea on how to do it yet. That's brilliant. But also have a culture strategy in place on how to make that happen, right? So a very in-depth understanding of people's behavior and how to change that becomes increasingly important. So that's the first thing, it's culture. That's and I would say the understanding of human behavior and leadership actually being trained in that to a certain extent, and them actually understanding what's possible and what's not possible. The second thing is then data. You have a business strategy, you know what you want to do from a culture perspective. Now, how can you use data to keep a finger on the pulse and to basically make informed decisions as you go, right? And two things I want to say about data, because I speak a lot about that in my individual session, is basically dashboards that help you make decisions, not dashboards that say, we have 60% of males and 40% of females. So what, right? What does that mean? What is the business impact? What do we need to do? So make them actionable. And that's not easy, right? That requires business people to work together with data people. And you have to kind of like build that bridge. And the last thing is, there's so much data in companies that is untapped potential. And very often that goes back to qualitative data. And that actually people are like, yeah, but that's qualitative. We don't know how to analyze that. And that's not necessarily true. There's tools that even, can analyze communications of leaders. And if you want to employees to see whether from a culture perspective, you are making the right choices and you're involving in the right decision, because how we communicate is also a way of behaving, and it says something about the culture. So there's lots of things and lots of value that's untapped. And one of the necessary advancements, again, is for leaders to be proficient in data and culture, which was my first point.
I love that you said that it's the leaders that need to do this, and basically, culture. Honestly, Shiva, I was expecting answers that were high-tech solutions. What you told me was the basics and the fundamentals, which I love. Basic. Yeah. Some people tend to forget that.
But I also think that the sexy things, the sexy tools, technology is an enabler for everything else, right? And it should never be the focal point. It's, if you want to go into the metaverse, great. How can it contribute to your, customer experience or employee experience? What are you trying to achieve? So never do things for the sake of doing things, but how do they tie back to the strategy? Yeah.
Absolutely. Doing or getting what's best for you, the tools that are best for you, and the people, of course, and especially the leaders. Thank you, Shiva. Daniel, going to you. Now, what key skills does the workforce of the future need to have? I'm very curious about this. And how can companies support the development of these skills?
Yeah, so there is a very strong connection between that specific question and some of the more general concepts that we were already sharing across, every panelist. So let me summarize on a couple of main ones. Some key skills that I think that are present already and are being developed hugely. We were already mentioning empathy for sure. The other one that is a favorite of mine is what I call deference, not to be confused with difference. Deference defined as consideration, as respect and esteem shown to another, and not just as capitulation to someone else or something like that. Keep in mind that definition, right? Deference as respect, consideration, esteem shown to another. engaging at that level to really understand instead of just being projective of something and then developing empathy as the next step in that conversation. And definitely flexibility, right? From a skills perspective, from an engagement model perspective, which is the biggest immediate change that we have seen in action the last couple of years. Companies can support these skills, making them truly part of their own culture. You know, what has been mentioned more than a couple of times today, it's just not about tactical items or sexy stuff. It's definitely about making it part of the ongoing behaviors, the culture that impregnates the whole organization. The example that I want to share about, our own organization, Microsoft, we work to empower every person and every organization in the planet to achieve more. And our leadership principles connect to notions such as model, coach, care. And that's how we make it part of the daily actions and behaviors across the organizations. And that's also going back to your tactical question, how you develop those skills and create the opportunities for people to develop those skills. And going back to one concept that we were discussing earlier, right? Creating a true hybrid model of work is what we continue working on, not just from a technological standpoint or from a geolocation kind of perspective, but from a true transformation of how we work. And I think that many times we have different concepts and semantics are really relevant in some of these conversations. When we think about hybrid workplace, when we think about hybrid way of work, the opposition between home and office, it's kind of a little bit of a initial part of the conversation, but what we want to say in that area and the way that we live that conversation, the way that we experience hybrid as a true transformative model is that hybrid workplace is not defined by where people gather, but how they feel included, how they become part of a different, more fluid way of work. When people feel included and engaged and have the liberty to work anywhere rather than just, feeling tied to a single space, either home or the office, the potential for innovation, the potential for really sharing cultures at a global scale and well-being increases exponentially. And I think that that's why we as an organization and me personally, I'm truly passionate about the implications of a true hybrid model, because it removes or it changes some of the limitations. And again, that's part of how organizations also create, nurture, and bring opportunities to people to nurture those new skills.
Wow, Daniel, I have to say the way that you shifted the meaning of hybrid working setup, it's amazing. It's not really where. Is that what you're saying? It's the feeling of engagement, how they work, and back to what Shiva was saying, basically culture.
Yeah, exactly right. That's the profound, deep implication that we see in the transformation. It started as where we are working. And for a lot of people, it started being much more than that, in the sense of it's not just about where, it's about when and how and with whom, and not only my immediate, role or even expectations in terms of career and opportunities. All of that has been transformed for many people in many different ways. A lot of positiveness behind some of those concepts, other ones, a little bit of a struggle. But I think that the underlying concept of flexibility at that scale really pushes us to think about even hybrid, not just as a traditional opposition of A versus B or something like that, but in terms of articulation. I think that's the power behind that concept,
Thank you for that. That was truly profound for me. Now, it is in recruitment where CX talent strategies become crucial. Shiva, back to you. How can current recruitment practices keep up with the workforce of the future?
Okay. So I guess the first question is, what does the workforce of the future look like, right? And one example is over the last months, year potentially, suddenly the metaverse is very hot, right? And everyone's talking about it. It's not necessarily something new, but it's become very hot, and there's lots of investment that's gone in and so on. Well, suddenly everyone wants to change what they're doing in terms of, how they're delivering learning and development courses and so on. So it has a profound impact. So that has changed. And change is not going away. Things will only, things will change more and more as they go. And a couple of weeks ago, I was driving by a petrol station with my son and my husband and my daughter. Anyway, we don't own a car. We live in Singapore, so we take taxis. So my son, who is about 2.5, he says, "What's that? What's that? The petrol station?" And so, I'm trying to simplify it for a 2.5-year-old what a petrol station is and why a car needs petrol. And I'm kind of looking at my husband as a cry for help to think, hey, help me out here. How do I explain this in simple terms? And he kind of looks at me and he says, why do you want to explain it? It will be irrelevant when he's growing up, right? And so that's exactly the point. Things are changing dramatically and they will continue to change, right? So why are we looking at resumes and what people know? Why are we looking at resumes at previous experience? Why are we looking at education? We should be looking for, it should be learning over knowing. It should be adaptability over experience. Yeah? It should be reskilling and upskilling, and that's been mentioned before, over education. Those things are a lot more important. And so even if I look at our own workforce, we have a small team, but half of my team, actually more than half of the team, they did something very different before, right? And I'm not talking about, the developers and those where they need a very niche type of skill set, but I'm talking about people potentially in business development, digital marketing, which is where there's a shortage in marketing. So those people, they can come from different types of backgrounds. So we need to fundamentally, as an industry, stop looking at resumes and really hire for potential. And that's not easy because that is uncertain. How do we define potential? Well, how you define potential is how someone is able to contribute to your business strategy by, what they bring to the table. That is potential. And that is the science that actually can help you to do that, but it's not common knowledge, right? So what can companies do? Well, it's to look for potential and to look for motivation. Things that we do, look for screening tools that help look at potential. That's number one, right? Don't necessarily look at resumes and try to avoid that altogether. That would be my advice, especially for roles where that's not key. The second thing is hire people based upon their behaviors. And, I'm a psychologist, so I overemphasize that. But basically, give them a real case study. I'm not talking about off-the-shelf role plays, a real case study. Let them do something meaningful. Immerse them into a task and see how they perform. Because behaviors, in the end, how you behave, what you do, speaks louder than what you say you can do, right? So that's where where you get your evidence. And then last but not least, always think about learning. And that should be, flexibility should be a currency, but learning should also be a currency. And same thing in the recruitment process. You've invested time with us. Let's give something back, right? Let's make the data more democratic and share it. So we've learned some things about you. Here's what we've learned. Would you agree with that? Would you not agree with that? What am I taking away from that? And I think that's very key at any point for them to feel like it's a meaningful experience, to make it short, make sure that the candidate experience is brilliant, but also to make sure that they're learning as they go. And so for me, those are the three things that the industry at large just needs to change to be able to keep up and build a workforce that's future-proof.
Shiva, I'm ecstatic to hear this from you, really. I think we've heard this time and time again, attitude over skill. And this also goes back to what Daniel was saying, where he really wants to see each individual contribute to society, of course, with a sense of empathy. And back to what you were saying about potential. Potential could be limitless. Yeah. Again, depending on each individual, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alex, I'd like to add a couple of more points on this question, if that's okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I agree with Shiva on the relevance of past experience or the relevance of education of candidates. I think it's becoming more and more obsolete of what you've done and where you've studied or what you've studied versus potential. And how do you assess the potential of the candidate and how do they fit with your organizational culture? I would like to add one more key theme that I've personally seen the past 5 months, and that is speed. Speed of hiring for me right now is one of the key differentiators of why candidates choose one company over another. And the speed is reflected through like how many rounds of interviews are you going to take them through? How many, how long will one interview be after the other? How many assessments are you going to have them take? How long are you going to have them wait before you get back to them? It's a very competitive talent market. So having the right timelines, having your hiring team aligned in terms of, put your feedback into our tool right away, and recruiters being on top of candidates, and not having them go through too many unnecessary steps. I think those practices would have to go away if companies need to continue compete for top talent. And I wanted to clarify one point on the hybrid environment. The way I defined hybrid environment from your question was a mandated hybrid environment from the company side that says you work Monday, Tuesday from home, and Wednesday, Thursday, Friday from the office. I think there's no value in that type of hybrid environment. But the way that we've talked about this today, in terms of how do you make this a choice for employees, because we do see people who don't want to work from home. They have small kids, or they have a noisy neighbor, and they really want to have more space. They want to have better connectivity. They want to meet other people in their daily lives. I think it's about offering that choice to employees and having a hybrid environment with intention that works for both parties. The companies that can allow and can offer this flexibility for both types of employees would come out on top. So yeah, flexibility is also part of that whole notion.
Yeah, and maybe just to add one thing is, you mentioned choice, right? And I think that's very important. And it goes back to empathy, which is mentioned before. Fundamentally, so there's one company that we work with that has included a notification. If you want to send emails out after 6, a notification pops up and it says, hey, are you sure you want to do that? Because it's after 6. And we kind of went, but like, even for me, personally, I have 2 small kids. One goes to school half a day. I like to pick my son up. I like my husband to drop him off. I like to pick him up. That means that my, 90% of the time, my lunch break is blocked for picking my son up. That also means that I end up compensating for that at night. So my workday doesn't stop at 6, right? And that's my choice. That's how I've hyper personalized it to me and what works and what makes me happy. The moment that you put structures in place, it doesn't become a choice. But then again, it's going back to uncertainty. As an organization, how do we manage the, everyone works their own schedule, and how do we keep track? and that is a very different leadership style and culture change.
Yeah.
It's definitely difficult. I understand, because you're trying to cater to each and every employee to come out with a win-and-win, situation. I understand it's very challenging, but thank you for that. Especially about the part about the thing you raised about speed. Was it, Lucas? I don't think many people think about speed. When they think of speed, it's basically just filling in the positions as fast as possible. But I think what you're trying to say here is take out certain processes that are no longer needed and put in ones that maybe might make the process a lot faster, but more efficient.
Yeah, and align exactly, and align all of your internal stakeholders around the expectations and around the timelines that you need to get back to the candidate. Because we often see delays from the hiring manager, from the interviewers that haven't put their feedback in on time, having roundup discussions, or the recruiter not getting back to the candidate fast enough. So if you align everyone and say, okay, I have this candidate, this is the process they're going to go through, and we need to get back to them as quickly as possible, then you'll be able to attract the talent.
And aligning on the profile you're trying to hire. Sorry.
Yeah. You were saying, Shiva, go ahead.
No, I was just adding on. Now it starts, because I was just saying that also aligning on the profile that you're trying to hire. And that's where we often see that the process is in place, but along the way, you can see that there's disconnects because, oh, you had that profile in mind and I had that profile in mind. So how do you quantify that? And how can you help the hiring manager and recruitment to be aligned on the profile? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for all your insights. Moving on now, one component that cannot be ignored is employee well-being, the employee experience. And at this point in our discussion, we've pointed out how employee experience is just as vital as customer experience. Krishna, since you mentioned this first, with this, are CX leaders keener today in listening to their employees and customers? And if so, what caused this realization?
Great, thanks for asking this. Look, organizations today are no longer operating in a state that can be termed as steady state, right? And expectations from customers, employees continue to evolve very quickly. And let me restate something very obvious. We are actually living in what you call the customer experience, or rather experience economy, right? Customers expect a hyper-personalization experience from brands. And the same way, I think candidates, the employees, everyone expects the similar kind of experience. You already heard from Siva, she was talking about that. Now, in order to deliver up to that expectations, the organization must reorient themselves around the customers. So the employees as well, similarly, right? So they really need to listen to customers even when they are not directly communicating. And the same goes for their employees as well. And so when brands put that sincere effort to know their customers, to understand them, only then they are really going to make that delivery of that exact CX, right? And so from what is going to be key important in this, that organizations increasingly are listening to customers throughout their life cycle. If they are not doing that, it's kind of already a red mark. It's already a red flag, which already showing that there's going to be disaster, right? And now, at the same time, what we have seen that there's a sea of changes in the attitude of organizations when we are talking about employees, right? Over 40% of CX leaders, they have actually confirmed that increased focus on employee experience due to the pandemic. And when you're talking about employee experience, that point of time, it was very much highlighted that how do we make sure that my employees are well, they're taken care of, they're looked after, they're not having to worry about certain basic things, right? Those are very basic, but much important one, right? Now, coming out of pandemic, there's a great deal of pressure to adapt for a far more dynamic and fast-paced environment. This kind of results on brands focusing on supporting their employees, engaging their customers, and ensuring they have the right data points. I think Shiva was earlier mentioning about how do you measure that, what you are doing, whether that's the right thing being done, and how can you improve from there on. I think those are really key areas. But for me, what really comes down to the cracks of the thing is that adopting the agile organizations approach. I think Daniel, Lucas, earlier, you guys kind of mentioned that as well, that the CX organizations, they really are trying to find the most effective ways of working, creating a conducive, productive environment for employees to be their best. I think the key here should be that to be the best. I think that goes very much to the talent, what again, creating that kind of potential for the future, right? So you're not getting that people ready already for tomorrow, but you're making them go there and you're making that transition happen. And I think that's what we are looking to get the better business outcome, and from both customers' point of view and employees' point of view. And I think increasingly, a lot more organizations are paying a lot more attention on this direction.
And I think that's always good news, despite COVID happening, that the objective or the driving force is they really want to be the best. Still on you, Krishna, with talent being more discerning of organizations they want to be a part of, how do you see diversity, equity, and inclusion evolving?
Well, glad that you brought this up, Alex. I'm pleased to see the theme of diversity, equity, and inclusion is getting the right attention it deserves. Probably it has been not talked about so much earlier. And I think Daniel earlier was talking about the whole employee aspect from the inclusive perspective, right? And how do we do better work together, right? And again, that has a connotation of the inclusive society, and that starts from the employee as well, right? So this is actually becoming a very key theme across organizations, across employer brands, and even creating a new employee value proposition, right? So we really need to understand that today many employees, especially millennials, they are looking for employers who make progress. Uh, they are not looking at organizations who are only making pledges but not doing much. And I must admit that there are organizations who are making that marketing effort but not doing enough. And I think that is being called out by people, the talent who are looking to work for those companies. So in a very recent study I came across, which found almost 80% of young millennials, they said they would be more motivated and committed at work if they felt their employer made a positive impact on society. And that is going to have a significant impact on recruiting and acquisition. And of course, retaining those talents. Now, we have also noticed significant changes in this respect with the CX outsourcing organizations. Now, there's definitely a great recognition of them seeing the need to take real action beyond just the pledge as well. And of course, why not? Their business is essentially based on the interactions they establish with customers. Good interactions rely not only on understanding each other and showing empathy, but also on displaying tolerance and accepting differences. And what could be a better way to practice that than imbibing the same into your organization's culture? I think we talked about culture quite a lot, and I think this makes a perfect sense. So we see more organizations are incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion as comprehensive strategies into every aspect of the talent lifecycle, creating an inclusive workplace where all the team members are appreciated and valued. And again, I think this kind of ties back to what Seva, Daniel, and Lucas was also talking.
Thank you so much for that, Krishna. Absolutely. I just want to reiterate what you said was accepting differences. Just want to highlight that again. The future of work continues to evolve right before our eyes. And as we learned from our guests today, it is key for companies to take a closer look into how they define the work they do for their customers, understanding the talents they need to onboard to take care of their customers, and envisioning the future for their employees and customers alike. This concludes the second plenary session of our Transformative CX Talks. Thanks to our incredible CX leaders for their insights on future CX talent strategies. Join us again for the third plenary session as we zoom into the digital transformation in CX. This is Alex C.